Hey, Topping Airlines Math Industry, and this is going to be part 2 of Sine Cosine Tangent. So the last part, we've learned about how sine is opposite divided by hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent divided by hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite divided by adjacent. So that's why we came up with the phrase SOHCAHTOA, because that helps us understand what the formulas are. So what we're going to do is try to use an example by solving one. Right here we have a right triangle, 5, 4, and x, and we have as our angle 53 degrees. We can use the Pythagorean theorem, but once you reach into Algebra 2, pre-calculus, trigonometry, calculus, and computer science, it's going to be a lot more complicated. So you got to find some other way to find what x is, but also to find the missing information. So we already know that this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So let's say that x is going to equal to 3 because it's a 5, 4, 3 triangle. But imagine if we never knew what x is. What can we do? We can definitely use one of the formulas, SOHCAHTOA, but which one should we use? If we use TOA, opposite divided by adjacent, we can definitely find that because we have right here the opposite divide that by the adjacent. So what we can do is find, yes, we have it, TOA. SOHCAHTOA, TOA is going to be our strategy selection. So we're going to say we need to find the tangent of 53 degrees because that represents right now our theta. The theta symbol right there is inside of the right triangle, indicating the number of degrees. So here's the tangent of 53 degrees. That has to equal our x. X is going to be on the bottom, but the 4 is going to be on the top. But that makes no sense because x represents the opposite, and 4 represents the adjacent. So we're saying adjacent divided by opposite. Well, if you take a look at the tangent, it says opposite divided by adjacent, and we have the tangent of theta representing degrees. Theta represents that degrees inside the right triangle. So if I made a visual, what we would do is rotate the triangle this way so we can understand that even though this has happened, the theta is right here on the bottom, which we wanted. So we're going to say 4 divided by x. So that is why we wrote it in that direction. So the tangent of 53 degrees is going to equal 4 divided by x. What does x represent? But if you realize another visual, if I rotate the triangle again, in reality it turns out that if this was the hypotenuse, this is the opposite, and this is the adjacent, because the adjacent is touching the ground. So I gotta somehow change the colors of both of the equations. So we're gonna say 4 divide that by x. So each color works, but I'm going to say the second one works because it's better to actually visualize. So what is x? The first thing we gotta do is find the tangent of 53 degrees. We have to use a calculator because we are not sure how that works because we actually have to get into higher level math. So we have to say the tangent of 53 degrees. And we get 1.3270. So I'm going to go right here and say 1.3270 equals 4 divide that by x. What we have to do now is multiply this side by x and multiply this side by x, multiply that side by x. So now we have 1.3270x is going to equal 4. If I divide this by 1.3270 and divide this side by 1.3270, 3270. Using the simple algebra in this step, there is one little problem. When using sine cosine tangent, you have the risk of the answer not being 100% accurate because you have these so-called decimals in the way. The more decimals you use in the calculator, the more accurate your answer will be. However, your work will be a lot more messy. So we're going to say x has to be around, 3.014. So x is around 3.014. If we understood that if we use the Pythagorean theorem and 3 represented x, using the tangent, 3.014 would be kind of our answer. If we put it close to 3, since it's very, very close by like hundredths and thousandths, your teacher will still accept it because your teacher knows you got very close to that answer. That is using the tangent. Now, what happens if we use something else? We have the same problem again, but we are not going to use the tangent because we're going to use something else. What can we do this time? Going back to SOHCAHTOA, what can we use? Well, what we can use is the cosine, and the cosine is adjacent, divide that by the hypotenuse. Going back to the problem, we're going to use the cosine. But how do we know which is the hypotenuse, and how do we know if it's the adjacent? The thing is, theta is not touching the ground. And looks like this is the adjacent. Not really, because theta is not right there. We have to rotate the triangle, so theta does touch the ground. That's 53 degrees. This right here represents the hypotenuse. So we're going to say this right here represents the hypotenuse. On the bottom, the adjacent is going to be touching the ground where theta lies. So it's going to be right here. So to understand our setup, we're going to say the cosine of 53 degrees is going to be equal to adjacent, divide that by the hypotenuse. We are going to say x, divide that by 5. So that is how we set up our problem. Now we have to find the cosine of 53 degrees. So cosine of 53 equals this, 0.6018. I'll take it. So we're going to say 0.6018 is going to equal x divided by 5. What we have to do now is multiply that by 5. Multiply this by 5 because we don't want a fraction. These cancel out. So we have to do 5 times 0.6018. So what we're going to do is multiply that by 5. And our answer is going to be around 3.009. So x is going to represent or be around 3.009. Remember, using sine cosine tangent will not be 100% accurate, but at least your teacher will know you're getting to that answer. To the tangent one, we got 3.014. For the cosine, we got 3.009. And using the Pythagorean theorem, we would get 3 as an answer. All answers are acceptable because they're very, very close. We'll actually be solving one more problem, but it's different. Hey, look at here. It's a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. And the dimensions are going to be x, x radical 3, and 2x. We are not going to be using a calculator because we're going to try to find what we can do without the calculator. So we know we can find out SOHCAHTOA right over here. But what can we do to understand how to set up an equation? We haven't used sine, so we're going to use that next. So what is the sine? what we can write about the sine is, we can write that we know that the sine is opposite divided by hypotenuse. So labeling, we want 30 degrees to be on the bottom. Now theta is touching the ground. So we are going to say that this is the opposite right here, and this blue marker that I'm going to use is going to be drawing the hypotenuse. So if we could ever solve a problem, here's what we're going to do. The sine of 30 degrees, because we chose 30 to represent theta as the equation. Actually, this kind of theta. So the sine of 30 degrees is going to equal x, divide that by 2x. If I try to simplify it, it's going to say the sine of 30 degrees is going to represent just 1 over 2. The reason why we said that is opposite divided by hypotenuse, x divided by 2x is going to be 1/2 x, or 1/2. So basically, that is going to be our answer. We are not going to find anything else because all we said is we are going to do it without a calculator. So that is how we find the sine. Opposite divide that by the hypotenuse. Always remember, theta must be touching the ground because things may change when you're doing trigonometry. And that is how we understand sine cosine tangent. This video has helped you understand sine cosine tangent. Thank you for watching Top Penalized Math Industry. Like and subscribe.